We don't have the music. So, yeah. Welcome to Not Sure This Matters.
You can't look at the camera.
Welcome to Not Sure This Matters. So, unfortunately, on this Friday, we are missing one of our band members.
We're doing this.
We're doing this. So, he's not here for a couple different reasons, and we're going to push through. So, Mike actually came up with the idea to do like a mod pod, answer some questions that have been sent in from viewers, which has actually been picking up quite a bit. So the emails getting some hits, the DMs are getting hits. And honestly, our whole goal in this, I think, was to provide like free information, insight into what we do, and insight into how you can kind of help yourself improve in terms of health. So Shoots and Fish solo mission today, but we're going to try to get through some topics.
Get better, buddy.
Get better. Some topics that kind of were sent in to us over the past couple of days and things to discuss relative to health. So one of the beginning kind of first things we'll talk about is the question was, will diet foods like Diet Coke or kind of any other, I guess, foods in general, impact your gut biome? So,
where do you want to start?
Yeah, I guess we
should probably define gut biome, or at least talk about the complexity of gut biome.
Right.
I mean, how infinitely complex it is, and how we don't really have a good handle on what it consists of,
right,
or what is perfect for everyone. So, or how the variability across individuals looks. So, to say that something can disrupt it is kind of hard to say.
Right.
And what that thing is, whether it be an organic or artificial or diet type of thing.
Yeah. And I think the bigger question is like, there's this whole kind of push now that all the artificial sweeteners are causing huge disruptions in the gut biome. Aspartame, which is used as a sweetener in, I believe, Diet Coke, right?
I believe so. I think almost every diet.
And phosphoric acid and potassium benzoate. So there's been a lot of studies on it. It's a very, very, very well studied chemical. And they've proven time and time again that it should not affect any part of your gut health and should have no impact on malignancies, cancers, or any kind of cellular changes in the gut. So that's been done extensively. And a lot of people, interestingly, I'm a Diet Coke drinker myself, but are always like, oh, why would you drink Diet Coke? It's so unhealthy. They've also even proven now that it doesn't cause dehydration.
Yeah.
So you can actually drink it and account for it as water intake. What would be, well, I guess we can parlay off that. If somebody said to you, well, can I use that as a hydration measure in the gym? What would you kind of respond to that with?
Yeah, for whatever reason, the diet sodas have really gotten a bad rap. And until recently, where people started to look at it from more of a practical solution for people, it has made a lot of sense to integrate or even endorse diet sodas, whether it be for weight loss, calorie allotment, or just hydration. We know that the amount of caffeine in let's say, serving of Diet Coke will not lead to dehydration. And in fact, if you're dehydrated from not drinking things and you tend to like Diet Coke, then drink Diet Coke.
Yeah.
It's also something where we have a really good example of the substitution effect when people are trying to lose weight. When you look at their diet or their diet journals and they're drinking 4 to 6 beverages of calories or calorie filled drinks, it's easy to say, let's switch that out for a diet alternative. So
right.
Diet Coke, Diet Snapple, something like that. And those make huge differences calorically. You figure a normal soda is about 100 calories, most of which is sugar. So you're cutting down 400 to 600 calories a day at times.
Yeah, significant.
Which is now across a week, that is 1 pound of tissue loss.
Yeah.
If everything else stays the same. So yeah, I think diet drinks have gotten an unfair bad reputation and can actually have a lot of benefit.
Yeah, I found just that sensation and the flavor aside from just regular water, is very quenching in terms of food drive. So I find sometimes if I'm bored hungry, right, like it's a day and you haven't eaten maybe enough, but you're just kind of like bored and you want a snack, you're most likely going to go get something sweet, salty, probably not the healthiest because you want to go for that instant satisfaction. Whereas like a Diet Coke or a Diet Snapple or any type of diet beverage will satisfy that urge, that taste bud experience, and then allow you kind of to buy time till you can either prepare a meal that you want to eat with high protein, healthier foods, or even satisfy that episode of hunger, and then you transition into your regular day. It's also interesting to me, the social etiquette with diet soda, though, because I do think some of the groupings of diet soda into full spectrum nutritional consumption of a day, it gets accused of bad stuff because it's associated with bad stuff. For instance, somebody might go to McDonald's and be like, well, I only drink the Diet Coke. It's like, yeah, but you're at McDonald's. Or like, I go to Five Guys and I get a Diet Coke. Why am I? It's like, you're at Five Guys. So you're eating a burger with 300 grams of fat. Or, you know, you sit down for dinner and you're like, I'll do just a cheese pizza with my Diet Coke. So you lump the diet soda into the category with horrific other
guilty by association.
Yeah. So it gets a bad rap. You see that a lot in people saying like, well, I started drinking Diet Coke, but I'm still tearing up.
I mean, I guess if we can't break the habit of like fast food, but they are reducing calories by, you know, dietary sodas or drinks.
Right.
Is one way to kind of say you're winning. And if it is a step towards making awareness more of a thing to make informed decisions, I guess I'll say that's a win. But I do think you hit the nail on the head earlier when we were talking about the sweet tooth and how it does kind of quell that. So if you're pairing it with, let's say, like your final meal of the day and you're drinking a diet soda or a diet drink that helps, you know, fill you up physiologically, as well as satisfy that psychological craving of something sweet while you're filling yourself with nutritious food, that's also a big win. So you can kind of get some, compounding interest in your favor when you start doing these types of activities together. And
interestingly, the whole question, the diet foods and stuff revolved around like gut biome. So gut biome is a hot topic. I do think there are experts in that field, I know, that are really, really in tune with gut biome. And I think maybe in the future we get one of those people to come on and kind of help us discuss that. But what I find is gut biome in modern day, I think we underappreciate two things that really crush it. One is alcohol. So our consumption of alcohol, we're always concerned about the actual ethanol in our blood and the actual chemical affecting our liver. We forget what it does to the lining of the gut and the actual inside of where you're storing it. And then the second thing are antibiotics, which are readily available. We use them frequently. And I'm not saying they're bad. We need them sometimes. But they absolutely decimate gut biome.
Maybe just clarify why antibiotics are so bad for gut biome is because of bacteria.
So like you should, as you transition through your gut, you have what are called gram positives and gram negatives. And there are types of bacteria that make different types of toxins. There's endotoxins and exotoxins and all these different scientific things that for this conversation don't truly matter. But as you get from your mouth to your anus, the further you go, the more gram-negative bacteria and the transition of types of bacteria, which are actually really useful. Like in the ruminant world, like cows and things, they use bacteria to chew up everything. We have like a modified version of that where we do have enzymes that help a ton, but we also have bacteria that break down foods into simpler molecules so that we can then absorb it.
And what do antibiotics do?
Antibiotics will kill those bacteria.
Right.
So you almost eliminate that population of a specific bacteria. Like if you take a certain type of antibiotic, it might attack only a gram-negative type of bacteria or a gram-positive. And if you take one that only attacks a certain type, you wipe that population out. The other population by default will take over.
Yeah.
So now you have a mismatch and an imbalance in gut biome. So alcohol and antibiotics are kind of the two biggest offending agents I could think of. Less so the dietary foods.
Yeah, I also think, the like simple stories that are told on Instagram, like all you need is a prebiotic or a probiotic, are patently false because of the complexity of like the balance of types of bacteria, either maybe mismatched or unbalanced. So to say that one guy has the solution by buying his 20% off supplement is just, it's charlatan.
It's kind of impossible.
But I can also hear Matt in my head right now being like, next topic, fact check. So like, hopefully that makes some sense with the gut biome question.
Yeah, and we'll come back. We'll get back to it too, because on many podcasts we talk about diet food in general, fads of high proteins.
Yeah, I can go off on diet.
Yeah, and we could get into that too, but I think we touched on that for now, and we'll leave it for another time. So next up on the list, if you're working out on your own and doing your own program, what are the ideal reps and sets, rest intervals or run 1 rep maxes, or to maintain lean muscle tissue? Now, I'm going to leave that fully to Mike because I have no idea.
All right. So if I'm hearing the question correctly, they really want to know how they can kind of self-monitor and maintain, I believe is the key word here, maintain lean muscle mass.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to differentiate, like acquiring muscle mass is a way different process than maintaining the muscle mass that you have, because that breaks down to there's two distinct types of loading parameters, one being developmental, the other being stimulative. So developmental is aligned with like, I need to put mass on me or really garner the physical nature or the physical properties of putting on muscle tissue or strength or whatever else, what other qualities that need to be obtained. In terms of stimulative, that means that you're giving the muscle or the nervous system or the tissue that you were trying to affect enough stimulation so it doesn't go away. And that is pretty low. Like pretty much as long as you're upright, moving, somewhat active during the day, like it basically guarantees that your muscle tissue just won't disappear overnight. So unless you're bedridden with an illness or an injury or something like that, where I think that some of the research says 3 to 4 weeks without any stimulative nature, that muscle starts to atrophy.
Yeah.
So that's great in terms of like, if you've been building muscle for 10 years and you really don't want to go through that process of continuing, putting on muscle mass, like you don't have to do much. Maintenance is a real thing. Just make sure that the other physical qualities don't go away. Now, if we really want to look at trying to put on muscle mass or change our physique or change our metabolism through acquisition of muscle mass, there's also a very broad bullseye here where all the research tends to say that if you're operating between 5 and 30 reps, where you have the proximity to failure of 0 to 3 reps in reserve. So you're, let's say, 3 reps away from failing at, 5 to 30 reps. You're almost guaranteed that you're putting on, or at least presenting a hypertrophic stimulus. So again, very broad base, which again, like we're really adaptable organisms.
Right.
We just have to make sure that signal is being consistently sent so that the body responds and an adaptation occurs. So I would say minimum effective dose, whatever body part that you're trying to develop, do 2 sets, 3 sets per workout of that muscle group, 5 to 30 reps, 0 to 3 reps away from failure. And the funny thing is the closer you are to failure, the less sets you need.
Yeah.
So again, this is why I'm biased to having a coach. So a coach can manage the volume appropriately and also give you appropriate feedback, making sure that your nutrition is on point, because you can do all this hard work and not have the nutrition support, not have the sleep support, not have the stress management support. And then you're not going to get the biggest ROI off the effort in the weight room. So I know that was a lot. So
no, it's a lot, but it's good. And you mentioned something that's interesting. You said this is why I stress having a coach.
Yeah.
How many bodybuilders that win the Olympia do you think coach themselves?
0.
Okay. So with that being said, I don't think it's even a question should you have a coach in any realm of professional activity? And it's interesting because in the medical world and surgery world, once you become like an attending where you're kind of your own out operating on your own, you don't have a coach. It's you. And there were so many times, depending on somebody's kind of self-assessment or ego or ability to be confident, where like, I think a coach in the operating room would be a huge deal, like in any situation. And I know I'm transitioning to medicine a touch, but but like if a professional bodybuilder who's the best of the best at making a physique perfect can't do it themselves, how then can a random person from the street walking into a box gym be like, I'm about to change my body? So here's my question in saying all that. I know some movement is better than none, and more movement is better than a little. But at the end of the day, now that I've been at this for quite some time and seeing progressions and kind of the stepwise manner you approach programming, there's probably something to be said, like you can almost put yourself in a reverse muscle build if you don't have your nutrition right and you're not doing the right style of exercise. So can you comment on that in terms of the model where it's like, all right, 30 people walk in a room, they're all doing the exact same thing. They all go home and do their own nutrition. Nobody's tracking anything, and they keep repeating that process. How much true progress can be had in that relative to the potential?
Well, I can actually give you a pretty real life scenario where when we didn't have full-blown nutrition and accountability services, our results weren't as good.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and the more things that we were able to help people manage, the better the results got, the better the client experience got, the better the relationships got, the better the business got. So, yes, I'm using this single business as, the pass fail here, but we've seen it time and time again. The people that also have a coach for the longest period of time seem to do better in the long run.
Yeah.
And I can use this gym, I can use this industry as an example, but to your point, Olympic athletes have Olympic level coaches.
Yeah.
Pro athletes have pro level coaches.
Yeah.
I believe the HBR, and maybe this is a fact check, Harvard Business Review did a study on the top 100 entrepreneurs of, a couple years ago, and they were polled these questions. All 100 had a coach at some point in their life or a mentor that they referred to as, a source of direction, oversight, so on and so forth. The interesting thing about that particular study is they asked what they wanted to differentiate the top 100 and the top 10% of that 100. And every person in the top 10% all still had a coach.
Yeah.
And you could look at that across any domain, academia, medicine, sport, whatever it may be. People who are coached tend to do better.
Yeah. I mean, Michael Jordan had a coach.
And if you think about it, like, if you have a financial advisor,
it's
not that you don't know how to manage money. It's that you don't have the time and the resource to allocate to managing the money.
Yeah, it's professionals and everything.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so that's...
But hopefully I answered that question in somewhat of a roundabout way.
Yeah, I think that's... I mean, I would say from a consumer, you've been on the production coaching end of things.
I have a coach.
Yeah. But you've been on the coaching end of things for a while with fitness. The funny thing is I get questions a lot, and I think people in this office think I'm playing dumb to try to get you business, but I'm actually just telling them the truth. They'll be like, well, can't you just write me a quick program? I'm like, I have no idea. And the fact of the matter is I don't, right? Like I can do your medicine pretty well, but like if you tell me to build you out a lifting program, I would be like, well, you're going to bench, you're going to do shrugs and squat. Because I don't know the intricacies of that. Maybe in 20 years of practice, I could learn it. But I think everything in life has a professional aspect to it, right? Like if you right now opened a landscaping business cutting lawns, it seems like, well, I'm just going to get a mower and mow some lawns. If you match up against somebody who's been doing it for 20 years versus you, how many lawns can you get done in a day? Yeah. You're going to lose every time. 1-to-1, every time. You're never going to keep up. So I think we need to start looking, and I think the world's starting to see the exercise nutrition world as a silo of like, I need to fund this part of my life. Because, for instance, this gym, the membership isn't $100. It's not $200, right? It's not cheap. But I believe something that if you're given a nutrition scale, I ended up, when told what to eat, kind of in terms of macros, saving money. Because I didn't just go buy random shit that I threw away in a bag of chips that sat on the shelf, or some veggies that I didn't eat, or excess meat or whatever. I was like, all right, I'm going to actually go shop for what I need.
Yeah, right.
So instead of spending $400 on things I might eat, I would spend $150 on this is what I'm eating this week in specific. And I think on the back end, you end up saving in terms of financials if you do take the coaching into account. Another question, should we train if we are sick? So I'm assuming illness, sick, like not just, oh, I feel a little tired, my sleep was off that day or whatever. I'm thinking this is like, say you start to have the flu or pneumonia or you got a cold or whatever. What's your thoughts on that? I can give you some scientific thoughts, and then maybe in terms of the physiology of training, what do you think?
Yeah, so the first thing to your point is like, are you sick? Are you feeling run down? So like making sure that we're talking about an actual illness, a flu, a virus, something like that. Especially when it comes to being contagious, don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Like stay home. The other thing I think about.
You mean for spreading?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, are you going to get everyone else sick?
Right.
Right. So just don't do that.
Yeah.
And if you are that sick with something that is, that's an illness that you can give to someone else, it probably means that your workouts will be compromised at best.
Yeah.
And you will also prolong the recovery time of that illness.
Yeah.
So not only are you putting yourself in the dirt, you're not getting a good workout, you're stressing yourself out more.
Yeah.
You're going to come away feeling unsatisfied with the effort that you could provide in that session, as well as make you sick longer and maybe worse.
Yeah.
The sickness will be actually worse because people don't realize the actual immune system demand on physical training.
Huge.
There's a very intimate relationship between your nervous system, your endocrine system, your immune system that's at play here. And when you challenge that in a compromised state, nothing good can really happen.
Yeah.
You might actually get hurt working out because of those things.
Right. And I think there's a little bit of a gray zone. Like if you wake up feeling a little tired, that's one thing. So I think in those times, from a medical perspective, working out, trying your hardest, moving isn't bad to stimulate a little bit of recovery.
Right.
If you're sick, like you're talking about, you will put yourself into a huge hole. And I think it plays into the whole rest thing as well, where we are usually, especially in the beginning of the kind of health journey, people are like, I'm going 7 days a week. I'm going every day. I'm going for 3 hours. And you're constantly catabolic. So for anybody who doesn't know, anabolic is in a building phase and catabolic is in a breakdown. And essentially exercise, you break down. And then when you rest and recover, you build up. So if you're already catabolic because your body's using so much energy to recover from an illness, and then you stack on top of that strenuous exercise where you demand more of your body, if you are not really, really fine-tuned at the upper end of an exercise kind of well-being mentality, physiology, you're going to do a ton of damage.
Yeah.
So I think in those cases, you got to rest, like you said.
And there's some easy tactics, especially if you are sick, making sure that you're well hydrated, looking into things like IV therapy, some of the booster shots that you do here with like glutathione and
NAD, C,
stuff like that, 100%. Making sure that your nutrition is adequate.
Yeah.
And if you're really like, let's say you're in a hardcore dieting phase, which could have led to your exposure or the susceptibility of being sick.
Right.
Stop cutting so much food out.
Yeah.
Making sure that you're having adequate carbohydrates to stay hydrated, because obviously, glycogen can pull water into the system. Sodium can keep water there. So you want to stay hydrated. Rest is a non-negotiable, making sure that you're sleeping. And when you start to feel better, like you mentioned, doing some light activity to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, which actually helps fend off some of these illnesses and get you back into a more recovered state, I think is an efficacious approach.
Now let's see if we can transition that. Also, I just thought of something like the first one. If you're working out on your own and doing your own program, what are ideal reps and sets? How about factoring in rest?
Oh yeah.
Because if you're doing your own program, it's probably really hard to work in a rest day because you think, well, I'll just do more. And the old school mentality was, well, I'm doing upper body one day, I'm doing lower body the next day. I'm not really affecting either if I do the opposite. When truly, like, if your entire body is in a stressed out standpoint and physiologically under high demand for recovery and you do upper or lower body, it's your whole body that's stressed.
Correct.
So you're still going to have a potentially detrimental effect. So in terms of rest days and what you do, and I noticed difference in rest days in different phases.
Yeah.
What's your kind of take on that in terms of exercise programming?
So the first thing I think about in terms of rest is that if you have more rest, you usually can perform better. And that might be between sets, between exercises, between workouts, between weeks, whatever it may be. But the more rest, which allows you to fill the cup back up and get back into a recovered state, you can train harder. The problem is subjectively, we have a hard time dissociating between what's difficult and what's actually productive. Because a lot of people come out of the gym, they want to feel beat up, they want to feel tired. They're like, oh, I felt the burn, I'm sweating my ass off, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't mean you actually got anything out of that workout. And this is why we look at things on a longer time horizon. Like when we look at performance indicators, is your a number of sets going up, your number of reps going up, is your weight going up? So some of these things are dependent on your rest in between exercises or the sequence of exercises so that we can actually appreciate what's going on behind these numbers. Like, are you actually acquiring muscle tissue? Is your adipose tissue going down? Is your fitness level going up? So yes, I think the first thing is if we can give you a little bit more rest, you will perform better on average across every other metric.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting from a personal experience, I have recently rarely felt sore. I've had a lot of rest and I've had more days off and my strength numbers are like through the roof.
You're probably the strongest you've ever been
in my life. And the crazy part is, if you had told me like 3 years ago that I would be, you make gains without feeling sore, I would have questioned it. But I've yet, these past few phases, I don't feel sore anymore. And when I do, I know I haven't rested or recovered enough.
Yeah.
And it's weird. Like mentally, like you said, you want to walk out of the gym being like, oh, everything hurts. But I don't know if that's the best, right? Like, I think those days for, say, an endurance athlete in college that, you got to just push it to the limit and see how much you can take. Great. But I think once you've kind of established that, like, how hard you can push it.
Yeah.
In terms of strength, phase, production, and actually output, I think the rest is the most incredible part of it. And just allowing your brain to realize, like, you're not going in reverse. You're just allowing your muscles to recover.
And I'll circle back to the question about building and maintaining muscle mass. If someone said they meet me at a party and they're like, "Hey, Mike, this is what I'm doing in the weight room," and they tell me everything they're doing, I almost would rather hear what they do outside.
Right.
Because if you told me, "Yeah, I'm usually stressed out all the time. I sleep maybe 4 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
I don't think my nutrition's on point."
Yeah.
I don't need to know what you're doing in the weight room because I know whatever you're doing isn't giving you much benefit.
Right.
So to your point, like all these things that live outside of the weight room and the drive and the hard workouts probably matter more for general fitness people at this point.
Yeah.
Only because like we have this idea that we're like, I don't want to overtrain too much. And what I think we see or conflate is under recovery.
Yeah.
Because life is tough, because you have kids, because you have responsibilities. Like you're not getting paid to work out at 4 a.m.
Right.
Like, you're doing this because it makes sense for your schedule.
Yeah.
Is it ideal? Maybe not.
Right.
Is it perfect? Definitely not. But that's what you have to do. So like to make these gains year after year, month after month, like you have to have all this other stuff congruent.
Yeah. Working together. I agree. Next up, how important is the VO2 max for longevity compared to labs, body fat, etc.? So here's what I would say. In terms of how important the VO2 max is to longevity, the VO2 max itself as a test, like, will that contribute to longevity? No. Like, what you do on that bike doesn't then make you live longer. What you do on that bike or running or however you want to do it can indicate your longevity, right? So two different things. It's what you're doing to exercise to build up. And then compared to labs, body fat, et cetera, I think it all works together. And we see, which is why I can say for myself, like, this version of medicine that I am in now is incredible, because I do get the time to dissect each and every person individually. Like, I don't even have any recommendations that come out of my mouth ever relative to age, sex, hair color, blood. Like, it's completely independent of any other factors. It's only dependent on that singular person. So the reason I'm bringing that up is I can see people with certain types of labs, certain body fat production, certain VO2s, certain RMRs, certain workout regimens, and all these other factors. And it will be a totally different recommendation based on just that data relative to somebody else with similar pieces of data, but maybe a different body fat percentage or a different set of like, everything is individualized. And I think VO2 max in specific is a really good indicator of cardiovascular health, and we've proven that it's a really good indicator of longevity. But in terms of how important it is to do one, it's more important to do exercise, rest, recovery, nutrition, so that you can build your labs, body fat percentage, body composition, and all of that into a manner that you will have longevity. But some statistics about VO2, as you know, it is the number one indicator of mortality. And as you said, even more so than blood pressure, cholesterol, visceral adipose tissue, smoking history. It's the number one indicator. So if you do a VO2 and you're in the exceptional range, you are going to probably live a pretty long time, a pretty good amount of time. If you're excellent, a little less than superior, but a little more than good, and then so on down the line. What's your take on VO2?
I'm aligned with that, and I think part of it is just the human experience of trying to figure out the one thing that they have to focus on when there's multiple.
Yeah.
And I also think that's why it's so important the way that you deliver medicine, to have this constellation of stats and metrics so that you can help guide the process more at the individual level. Because we can look at all the stats and say, hey, VO2 max is a great predictor of longevity. However, that's not the end all be all, right? Like, we also know that muscle mass is really important. Why? So making sure that we are looking at this idea of health, not as a single measure, not as a single input, not as a single thing the individual can do, but multiple things that someone can exploit and leverage to their benefit to have the life that they want, whether that be, I want to be active physically. I want to climb up mountains. I want to, be able to bodybuild. I want to be able to do this into my 70s. VO2 max might not be the best indicator for the life that individual wants to lead.
Right.
So having this, these various vantage points, all looking at the same idea, which is very unique and very individualized, and then reverse engineering what are the things that they can do. Because if they're an exceptional VO2 max at 35, but they're really low on muscle mass, maybe you don't have to do any more VO2 training.
Right.
Maybe you should put some time into the weight room.
Without a doubt.
Maybe you should focus on your nutrition. So all these other things which look good on paper might not apply to that person and when you forecast the next 3 decades of their life.
Yeah. And I always think it's interesting, like, we are professional humans, right? Like, if there's a profession out there, like you do exercise nutrition profession, I do medical profession. Some people are electricians, carpenters, plumbers, whatever you might be, that's your profession. But we're all kind of like human, and we need to be professional human.
Yeah.
So I always say, like, I would probably be more willing to take advice on life from the 105-year-old monk who's like made it with no stress than like Jeff Bezos, right? Like, I think the longer you live, I think the more professional you are and the more wisdom and life advice you can give. So I think the whole goal of all of this is to allow you to be a professional in what you're doing. But if you take care of your body and you take care of your profession of being a human and being healthy, you can contribute way more to society, I think, than if you're unhealthy and miserable and stressed out, which usually root cause is because something inside of you is off, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can usually track everything back to some form of foundational health. There are outliers to everything, right? So there are mental, brain issues with mental disorders, which are completely out of our realm. There are people that are born with things or cancers that start that we can't really figure out how to stop right now, completely out of our hands. But I think what we can control relative to, say, VO2 max kind of test is our foundational health, and like how much effort you put into it and how much you prioritize it, how much you're willing to spend on yourself to get somebody to help you do these things, like a gym like this that does catered care, a medical service like this that does catered care, and surround yourself with people that actually want you to do better. Because when you walk into a box gym or you walk into a regular hospital, like, those people don't actually give a shit, right? Once your credit card swipes, they don't care. The visit with your PCP, like, great. If you're doing great, they pat you on the back and you go. But that person's not like thinking about you at midnight and what they can do to make you better. So I think a lot of it, like the VO2 to me, is a good indicator of if you kind of have your shit together, right? Like, are you well balanced? Because you could kind of not be super successful in financial world or whatever, and you have your health in order, and you're probably a much happier person than the human making $8 million a year, but is sweating all day at his or her desk and doesn't get home till midnight, and family hates him and has no relationship, right? Like, that's not a good balance. And that person probably on a VO2 will not do so well.
Right. Well, I think I like that idea of like, what does it tell us about cardiovascular health? It tells us a lot.
A lot.
Right? And maybe it's just the mere fact of being like, hey, good news, you don't have to worry about your cardiovascular health right now.
Yeah.
As long as you don't take major steps backwards,
right?
Don't worry about it. And let's focus on this other thing that is a little bit more of a threat.
Yeah.
And that might be through the WABI or the RMR or any one of the markers in the blood panel.
Yeah.
Be like, we need to focus on this so that you can actually utilize your cardiovascular health in the long term.
Yeah. All right, next question. If dining out, are there things you should stay away from other than booze? And I think that's a pretty good question, because I think eating out it was funny. On my way home yesterday from here, I was thinking about something. If we got rid of all made to order food, all fast food, and all restaurants, I think we would probably eliminate a lot of obesity. Right? Like, if you had to, every single time you ate, make your own meal, make your own food, like, you would not eat as much.
100%.
It would take way more effort to get your food. It would kind of set us back to almost the hunter and gatherer kind of somewhat augmented phase in life, where you actually had to like put effort into getting food into your mouth. So going out to eat is never going to be the healthiest option. I don't care where you are. But what do you think in terms of like generalized statements, things you should stay away from?
I mean, the reality of the situation is like, we deal with a lot of busy professionals, busy moms and dads, and going out to eat is just part of like life's experience right now, especially when like, I have a business meeting, I have a business lunch, I have all this stuff. And I think it's important to differentiate, like, are we going out to eat or are we celebrating?
Right.
Because a lot of people use the excuse of I'm going out to eat as I'm just going to eat whatever I want.
Yeah.
When it's like, it's not your grandparents' anniversary.
Yeah.
It's your Tuesday lunch meeting.
Right.
You know, like there's no reason to get a gin and tonic and like cheesecake at lunch.
Yeah.
You know, so I think part of it is planning ahead, which we talk about a lot, so that people are less likely to succumb to their environment or their conditions, where you're probably not going out to eat by surprise.
Yeah.
You're probably aware of it. Most of the time you're aware that you're going out on a Friday or a Tuesday or whatever it may be. So look at the menu. See what the healthy options that are fitting with your current nutrition framework is, and just commit to eating that. And most restaurants, you can find a healthy option. Even if it's not really what you want, it's just one meal, right?
Yeah.
So worst case scenario, get a salad, get a piece of grilled chicken or a grilled piece of meat with no flavors, no seasoning, no nothing. Ask for the dressing on the side and apply however you want,
Yeah.
right? But a lot of it comes down to expectations, which, again, many of our clients will go on vacation. They're like, should I track food? Should I throw it out the window? What should I do? It's like, well, what do you want to happen?
Right.
Like, because the worst case scenario is if you don't choose, you're going to try to track.
Yeah.
And then you're going to try to have fun.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you're going to do neither well.
Yeah, it's going to suck.
You're going to kind of track and then regret what you ate and then like call it a loss. So it's like, hey, pick and choose your moments. Like if you're going to go out once a night or once a day on vacation, enjoy it.
Yeah.
And chalk it up to that's what it is. And we also have to be cognizant that like one meal isn't going to break you.
No.
Just like one workout isn't going to make you.
Right.
So we just have to be realistic with like the timeline that we're looking at these choices and making sure that they are congruent with like what we want to do, our expectations, and the reality of the situation.
The other interesting thing, I get it up here, like say you're walking around and somebody's up here and they're like, well, I want to look like that. And you just said something that triggered a thought is one meal's not going to break you. One meal's not going to make you. But to end up looking and feeling like, say you do, how many meals and how much time does it actually take? Because I don't think people truly get the stepwise manner it is to get yourself in shape. Like they just think, well, I'm going to go for 4 months and I'm going to get these big muscles. I'm just going to be able to lift 300 pounds. Like somebody in my office a couple of weeks ago was like, I want to just be able to bench 300 pounds. And I was like, well, what do you bench right now? Well, I haven't worked out at all in a long time. I don't know. Like, what does it actually take in terms of effort to get to the point of, say, where you're at in terms of your exercise career?
Well, I've had somewhat of an unfair advantage compared to most people because, I've essentially lived the athlete life for the last, 3 decades.
But that's your answer.
Well,
think about it.
To be, but that's not to say that it's going to take someone else 3 decades to get where they want to be.
Yeah.
And again, like to your point, like everyone's starting from their own unique starting point with their own disadvantages, deficits, and also advantages. So I think it becomes a realistic or a conversation about like the realistic goals and timelines, because most people have decent goals. They really have shitty timelines.
Yeah.
So making sure that those align so that people don't feel frustrated. And there's some basic like back of napkin math that we can say, hey, you can lose fat at this rate and you can acquire muscle at this rate. So if we project it to be, 7 months down the road, is that something that you're willing to commit to?
Right.
So that there's no real unknowns except for life itself. But there's in terms of the goal, like we have a very deliberate place that we want to be and roughly a timeline where we believe it's reasonable for those expectations to be met.
Right. Because I was looking at my MyZone, which I like to wear. It's like a heart monitor, calorie counter, and then there's this thing called MEPS and all that stuff. And here at the gym, a lot of people have them. It's kind of a way to track your progress and track your effort.
Yeah.
And I think it was in the past like 4 or 5 years, the most I've missed in a year was like, I think it was like 81 days or something, which like is not a lot of days in a year. And that's with scheduled rest at least once to twice a week. And then there were 2 years where I missed under 30 days, like the cut years where I was like, I'm doing this. Because sometimes people say, well, I just want to like look like that. And how do I do that? And it's like, well, you don't just do a few things. It's a prioritization. And I think the benefit is hard to see because in the front end of it, you have to take so much time to put into the exercise, put into the nutrition. But on the back end of it, once that becomes a habit, everything else in your life gets better. So I'm talking about all this. And the reason I'm talking about it is like, it's a very different experience, say, for me and you to go out to eat than somebody who hasn't put in some time.
Yeah.
Like in your world of being involved in what you've been involved with for kind of your whole life, one day is like a 0.001 percentage
Correct.
of an effect. For me, it might be a 2% or 3% interaction. But for somebody on the start of their journey, maybe that going out 3 times a month is like a 50% effect, right? Because if in your first month, you bomb your calories or your macros for 4 or 5 days that month, you might as well wipe the whole month out. So I think keeping perspective on that's a big deal. So like going out for me, aside from avoiding alcohol, my biggest concern is always just fat content, right? Because I know in the short term, super duper high carbs or super duper high protein is not really going to matter. But if I overload on fat by 300 grams, it matters. And the reason it matters, we've talked about it on pod in the past, is for you to thermodynamically process protein, it takes energy. For us to thermodynamically process carbohydrates, it takes energy. So it's like a recycling plant. Like you have to start the fire, start the furnace to even get the plastic into it to recycle it. So you're burning fuel to make fuel. But for fat, you just eat it and it goes right to your fat. So the whole thing, if it's in my mind, if you're going to go out to eat, number one, I like to do it. I like to look at the menus ahead of time, right? So if I'm going to whatever restaurant in town, I'm on the menu just so I'm not blindsided by getting there and be like, oh, I don't have any choices that I like. And the second thing is I just try to avoid fat, which is very hard to do in the restaurant industry because even if you ordered quote unquote grilled chicken, it's very rare that chicken is going onto a like propane grill outside that's like not bathed in oil. It's going on a flat plate that's hot with oil around it and it's grilled. But you're getting a piece of chicken covered in oil. So at the end of the day, avoiding the fat, I think, for me, is probably the most important thing.
It's easily the most underappreciated aspect about eating out is that there's so much more fat content than you can actually account for. Right? Like to your point, like it's probably been sitting in oil. There's butter. There's other dressings and seasonings involved.
Right.
So the fat will always add up faster than any of the other macronutrients. And most of it you can't account for. So even if you were trying to plug it in your MyFitnessPal or your calorie tracker, you're probably going to be way off. So you almost have to over-index on fat content and then reverse engineer your day. So like if you were to do this and look at the restaurant's menu ahead of time and said, hey, I'm going to get this, and I'm going to believe there's an extra 20% of fat, you plug it in, then you can backcast the rest of your day and be like, well, I'm not going to eat what I usually eat for breakfast because I'm going to save some of that fat content for the dinner that is an unknown.
And one of the questions earlier on was talking about like fad diets, high protein, things like that. And I can't help but bring it up in my mind, like the keto carnivore thing going on, because I see it every day, and we'll talk about it more down the road. We'll make note for when Matt's back. But I see a ton of carnivore eaters, and they look great. Their body looks great. It is a ticking time bomb. I really want to get the PSA out there. Like, if you are eating fat in excess, if you are eating it as if you think it's going to help you be healthy, you are going to be sorely wrong in a really bad way down the road, and the data proves it. So we have ways of tracking plaque. We have ways of tracking markers that would lead to plaque buildup. And across the board, I don't care. I will go online and I see these Instagram people be like, well, the first month of keto is really bad for you. But then beyond that, your body gets used to it. You never get used to having piles of fat in your blood. Your blood is thick. It turns into like oil, and then it irritates your blood vessels really, really bad. And I just have to say it because it's such a prevalent thing these days. And there's so many online coaches pushing carnivore diet. And yeah, in the first couple months, you'll lose a ton of weight. No problem. But you're actually just killing yourself. You're going to have a stroke. You're going to cause vascular disease down the road. There's just no arguing it. So In terms of fat intake and fad diets related to potentially the whole thing with going out to eat, fat is, I think, our biggest concern in my book, because vascular health is of priority, and fat is the number one irritant to the lining of your blood vessels. So be very careful if you are in one of these carnivore phases to not stay in it for long. And actually just, I would recommend not doing it. You need a balance of everything: carbs, fat, protein. And if you look at a true macro breakdown, the least amount in terms of gram and weight of intake is fat, almost across the board. You don't need as much fat as you need carbs and protein. So it's completely counterintuitive to human nature that if your body was to be made up of protein and muscle, right, and lower fat than muscle is what you want, that you would overwhelm your body with excess fat. Like, you have to sometimes have logic before science. And the logic tells you, like, even if you're 30% body fat, that means you're 70% non-fat.
Yeah.
So why would you feed a machine that is built of protein excess fat? Like, it doesn't make sense. So the proof is in the pudding, and the lab data shows it, but it's a really dangerous fad. And back in the day, I don't know if you remember Dukan diet. So there was a cardiologist, last name Dukan, and he was like, this fat heavy diet. It was carnivore before carnivore. He died of a heart attack. And then, like, everybody that did the diet died of a heart attack, right? So we already proved that. People forgot about it, and now we'll reprove it again, because there'll be
one of the most
prominent
carnivore doctor guys doesn't do carnivore anymore because his panels got bad.
Terrible.
Like,
I have never seen anyone walk in this office on a carnivore diet whose labs look remotely close to good. Last question. Thought on non-alcoholic drinks like Athletic Brew, mocktails, NA spirits, or completely stay away?
It just comes back down to, like, what problem are we solving with the choices that we have?
Yeah.
Right. So, like, if you are nervous about drinking alcohol and you've had maybe a history with alcohol or overconsumption, I would say go for it. Drink the non-alcoholic beverage, the mocktail, whatever it is, so that you can obviate the alcohol scenario. I don't have anything against those in general. I just have no interest, because when I drank for the result. So the taste of an alcoholic beverage wasn't the reason why I was drinking. Like, I never would be like, I need a glass of wine right now to complement my steak dinner.
Right.
It's like, I want wine so I can get drunk. So I think it's like, what are we actually solving with these tools that we have? And they're definitely tools. And if it helps you take the edge off and, use the substitution effect to your advantage, by all means, but just be cognizant of the fact that most of these options do also have calories that you have to account for. So it's not free.
Right.
It's like, it's not a diet version of alcohol.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, making sure that, like, why you're drinking it is in line with, like, your goals and your current status.
Yeah. And I think, I just think if you really like the taste, like a mocktail is just a mixed bunch of juice and beverage. I think that's reasonable. Like, if you like the flavor of orange juice mixed with cranberry and a little spritz of seltzer, go for it. The non-alcoholic beers, to me, I mean, I don't know. If you really love the taste of beer, great, go for it. But like, you got to realize, like you said, it's not just free. And I don't know. I think it's more of just a marketing. It's a way to keep people from
consuming,
leaving the bars, because a lot of people just go to bars to drink alcohol, clearly. And if they are not going to drink alcohol, how do you maintain their viewership? Well, you give them non-alcoholic drinks just to make sure they come and socialize, which is great too. If that's where you want to socialize, no problem. I mean, now that I don't drink, I have no problem going and standing at a bar and interacting with everybody. It doesn't bother me. But I just drink a Diet Coke or seltzer. So a mocktail to me is just another version of that.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point with the social pressure of, like, when you don't drink, everyone asks you, like, why don't you drink?
You got some problem.
Crazy. But if that helps you get around the social anxiety so that you can still hang out with people that you may or may not really want to hang out with, by all means do it.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, the people, someone will be standing in front of you who's like overweight, drunk, sloppy, with a drink in their hand, who's not a high performer, and be like, "Would you have a drinking problem?" You know, it's kind of like, well, I don't know if you should be asking that question. But it's an interesting dynamic. Without booze, you're definitely the odd man out. And I guess we could talk about it a little bit. Like, the biggest issue with stopping drinking totally is actually you definitely have friends that it's only associated with drinking. So you kind of got to be prepared to lose them. But then you do realize who like your real friends are, because there are people that will still drink around you and hang out with you, and they don't really care.
Yeah.
And that's actually a good filter. It was an interesting transition in time, because I definitely lost a bunch of people I normally hung out with. But then you realize there were still people that stuck around, and the drinking wasn't the only thing involved.
Well, it's also interesting, like when we do our client appreciation events where there's clearly alcohol available, no one says boo. Like no one says, "Are you drinking?" or "Why aren't you drinking?"
Right.
or "Why are you drinking?" Like everyone just gets together and has fun.
Yeah.
You know, so like I think that's the uniqueness. Another uniqueness of these businesses is that we bring people together for the common thread of enjoying each other's company.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a genius move, and I don't know the invention of alcohol, how it started, but if you wanted to have a substance that allowed lots of a heterogeneous group of humans to sit and socialize, it was alcohol, right? Because it broke that boundary of people's insecurities to talk about what they like.
Inhibition.
So you instantly allow people from all walks of life, all genders, all races, all socioeconomics to kind of be in one communal area without a filter, and they can interact and socialize. So I do give that a little credit, because at a bar with a couple drinks in you, you might meet or talk to somebody that you never would have before.
Yeah, totally.
But I think once you learn to not rely on that, you can do the same thing with just the same amount of effectiveness. So I think this was a success without our host.
I'm going to say it probably wasn't as most entertaining.
No, more factual.
But yeah, I mean,
but I think our goal,
we are, guys.
Yeah, and I think our goal of this, even with Matt on board, and I think, is to get out information on where healthcare and true health is going, right? Because I know it sounds like I shit on the hospital systems all the time. They're really good at fixing a symptom or final intervention. They're really bad at preventive care. And the whole goal is to stay out of hospitals. And this is how you do it, with exercise, nutrition, and preventive care. And I would almost guarantee, if you went to any hospital in the world right now and walked into any floor, emergency department to chronic care to anywhere, and you asked a person, would you rather be here or would you rather be at home? They'll answer, I'd rather be at home. And then if you ask them, hey, if you could take it back and you put in an extra 30 minutes a day to avoid being here, would you have done it? I almost across the board would say, everybody would say yes. And I think humans are really bad at prediction in terms of your emotional response. Meaning, I'm having so much fun. I live for the moment, says every unhealthy person. Yeah. I have fun. I don't care what I do. I smoke my cigarettes. I drink my beers because today is a great day. That same person in the hospital, every single time you interact with them, just wants more time. And the time they had wasn't enough, meaning that time wasn't as superior as they were making it seem. So I think what we're trying to do is get that healthy lifestyle promotion out there, expose the availability of it in places like this where there's a gym, doctor, the new age of healthcare, and kind of get people involved in it. So we ask, like, if you got questions, please DM. If you want,
this whole
email
podcast
us.
Was driven by
this whole podcast was driven by questions from one of our viewers.
And that person might know the new guy.
The new guy, Brian.
Yeah.
We won't talk about him too much on podcast though.
Well,
we're told not to.
Well, next week.
Unfortunately, we don't have a game today because you need a host for a game. But
Marcus.
we are Marcus.
What do you want to do?
Yeah,
what did you get your girlfriend for Valentine's
By the
Day?
way, Marcus has amazing hair. Yeah, what did you get for Valentine's Day, Marcus?
Flowers, some regular stuff.
Good.
Regular stuff.
One day you guys will get to see him. He's too good looking to have next to us.
Yeah.
So I think with that being said, we appreciate everybody listening, and on to the next week.
Yeah. We'll see you guys. Thank you.
Adios.